Well, good evening, everyone. I'm Anthony Luscre, Kilo 8 Zulu Tango, and this is RATPAC. It's March 21st, 2024. We're going to do something a little bit different tonight, just a little bit different Thursday night program. We're going to talk about setting up a VHF UHF station, but the focus is going to be on the first of our series on first steps in amateur radio communication. So we'll talk about that a little bit more, but I'm going to go through the main part first. As usual, my contact information, k8zt73@gmail.com, and my website, k8zt.com, and links to the slideshow. We'll put the PDFs also up, but if you want to shoot the QR code, you're welcome. I'll have that at the end of the slideshow also. That'll give you direct access to all the links. Either way, you're going to want to get the links because there's links spread throughout the entire presentation. Whenever you see this little link symbol or this font, that means there is something you can click on. So, we're going to focus on VHF and UHF bands tonight, and what are they? The very high frequency VHF band is the ITU designation for the range of radio frequency waves from 30 to 300 megahertz, also approximately 9.9 to 0.99 meters. Ultra high frequency starts at 300 megahertz and goes up to 30 to 3000 megahertz. The other two bands above that we're not going to talk about tonight are the SHF Super and the EHF extreme high wave bands, aka microwaves. The thing about all these bands is they're all available with full privileges to anyone with a technician class license or higher, which is all hams nowadays, unless you're one of the few novice licensees that still has the godfathered license. Grandfathered license, not godfather. VHF and UHF bands, the most popular ones are probably these six. We're going to focus on just a couple of them here tonight, but I have links here for more information on the microwave bands. Again, when you see that little symbol, that link, you can click on it. This is a presentation by Brian Lee that's pretty good about the bands above 1 gigahertz. Also, the ITU Region 2 band plan, and this isn't exactly what we have in the United States, but we have to follow this as the over guide, so it does match up quite a bit. And this, we're in Region 2. And the last one is the full FCC table of frequencies. This isn't just VHF and UHF, it's everything. So if you've ever went through this chart before, it's rather extensive, and it doesn't just have amateur radio, it has all the different services on it. Those three links are available at the bottom for you to click on. But as I mentioned earlier, tonight's main focus is going to be 2 meters and 70 centimeters. Now if you're interested in the band in between, 222, Michelle did a great program a few months back on the haunted band. So click on this link and that'll bring you out to the RATPAC presentation, or look on the RATPAC list for the haunted band presentation. VHF and UHF amateur radio types. First of all, there's FM only radios, but there's two types of FM. Analog FM, the traditional FM radios we've been using for years, and digital FM. Now don't confuse this digital with the digital such as FT8 and FT4. This is digital FM, aka DMR, D-Star, C4 Fusion, R75, and a few other ones that I can't remember off the top of my head. We're not going to talk much about those tonight, but I just want to mention them. The other type of VHF, UHF radio you can buy is a single sideband NCW and FM radio, aka a multi-mode radio that does more than just FM. What can you do with UHF FM radio? Well, FM Simplex contacts. You can use an HT, talk across the grounds of a ham fest to your friend. You might be using this for emergency communications. They typically come with a rubber duck. HTs come with a rubber duck on top of them. A lot of times that is very inefficient, but we'll talk of ways around that. FM analog repeater contacts. Use a repeater to make contacts over longer distances. It can act as a meeting place, a frequency where you can all get together, as opposed to being on Simplex and having to go to a specific frequency. Everyone in your area knows what the repeater frequency is. Additional features might also include linking to other repeater services via RF or internet, cross-band connections, etc. FM satellite contacts, mainly what are called the low Earth orbit satellites, use FM, and you can access them with a standard dual band FM radio, one that has both 2 meters and 440. One is the uplink frequency, one is the downlink frequency. It does require a little bit of gain antenna, so we'll talk a little bit about antennas here a little bit later. You can also use the space station. It basically has an FM satellite capability, a repeater in the air. VARA FM is a form of WinLink that uses special software to send email type messages, and it's very useful for MCOM purposes. APRS, Automatic Packet Reporting System, can be used for tracking locations. It could also be used for sending text. Now, the one that's grayed out a little bit at the bottom here is FM Digital FM repeater contacts. They require these special radios we talked about before, the DMR, Fusion, D-Star, etc. What can you do with a multiband radio? Well, everything you can do with an FM-only radio, but you can also do single sideband or CW contacts. Now, the main use of this is for contesting, long-distance communication, and weak signal activities. There also are some satellites that you have single sideband and CW. They're often referred to as linear transponder satellites. If you want to do FT8 or FT4, you can do it on the VHF and UHF bands, but you need single sideband capability to be able to do it. It's mostly in contesting. It's very popular in the 6-meter contest, which is one of the VHF bands that we're not going to talk a lot about tonight, but it's also available on 2 meters. It's very limited activity on 440, but no reason it couldn't be. You can also do CW or digital EME, Earth-Moon Earth Bounce. As I mentioned earlier, mostly in contest, some satellites, but SOTA and POTA activities are often done with single sideband or CW, but they're also done with FM in some cases on VH and UHF. And as I mentioned earlier, if you want to do FT8, you need single sideband. So here's a little chart showing components of a typical VHF UHF station. We have a radio, an antenna, a coax feed line, and a power source. Now, if we jump over here to the far right-hand corner, you'll see a handheld has basically everything integrated into one package. But for the other ones, we need to talk about what makes up these 4 components in a system. So if it's a mobile system, we might have a mobile radio, a mobile vertical antenna, maybe with a mag mount or a different type of mount to attach to our specific vehicle. We need to run coax from the antenna to the radio. Sometimes these mounts you buy, such as a mag mount or a clamp-on mount, may have the coax as part of the process, or sometimes it might be connected directly to the antenna. It might all be one unit and comes with the mag mount, the antenna, and the coax all built in. We need a power source. Well, conveniently in most vehicles we have a 12-volt battery, and that can be used as our power source. Now that may be a problem in the future because we're looking more and more at 48 volt battery systems, but most people that use higher volt battery systems realize that people need these other voltages for accessories, so there's typically probably still going to be a 12-volt port available in the vehicle. For a base station, we could use a base radio, or we could use that same mobile radio. There's no problem with using the mobile radio at home. We just need to use it a little bit differently. For the antennas, we have a huge variety of options available to us. We can run a vertical, we can run a beam, we can run a ground plane, we can put up a dipole, work just fine. We have those options when we're working with a base station. Now, the one problem we do run into with a base station is usually there's a longer run of coax necessary than there is in our vehicle. So we need to use higher quality, lower loss cable than we would for a short 10 to 20 foot run in our car, because probably we're going to need maybe 100 foot of coax. So coax loss can be important for a base station when it's a longer run. For a power source, we need DC power, and it's typically going to be what's referred to as a 12-volt power supply, although most of them really put out about 13.5 volts, or we might use an emergency battery, or we might use both. If we really want emergency capability at home, we might want to have both a DC power supply and an emergency battery. For portable operation, we can choose any of the radio types, an HT, a mobile, or a base. We can set it up on a picnic table. We can set it up on the top of a mountain. It just depends how big it is and how far you have to carry it. For antennas, we might use something portable, such as a roll-up J-pole antenna that can fit in our pocket and be made out of twin lead antenna cable and a small connection to our radio via a short length of coax. But we could also use a ground plane, a small beam, a vertical, etc. We usually have a shorter run of coax when running portable, so sometimes we can get away with a little smaller coax, a little higher loss, but because we're running at short distances, it's not as important. We don't have to lug that really heavy cable up with us on portable operations. We're going to need a power source, typically an external battery, or maybe a generator if we're going to be running for long periods of time. Sometimes in a portable situation, we might have AC power there, so we might have commercial power available. So that doesn't mean that it's always going to have to be emergency type of battery power. But these are the basic components, and you can find all of these from your favorite ham dealer at a ham fest, a number of different places, and the amount of money you spend depends a lot on what you're interested in. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. So here's a typical base station. In this case, it's not just an FM only radio, it happens to be a multi-mode radio, and a multi-mode radio that also has HF. This is the Yaesu 991. We'll talk about some of the choices later. You notice we are running a feed line that has a fuse in it to a power supply, and we have it all ready to go. We have a microphone here to plug in, we have the coax to plug in, and outside of the house we have in this case, a diamond or comet fiberglass antenna up on a pole, nice out in the clear, ready to operate. This is a great setup, very easy to do. But we could do this radio in this setup if we wanted to, so there's no reason that we couldn't use this mobile radio and replace this and use this antenna and this power supply. But in this case, on this slide, we're going to use it mobile, so we have to have a cable running out, and it's suggested that you connect your radio directly to the battery. I have some information later on this that you're going to want to read in detail because that can be a tricky part of this operation. Sometimes you can get away with plugging into a cigarette lighter or something like that, but for a permanent installation, you're going to want to run it directly to the battery, and you're going to want to fuse the leads and make sure everything is good. You're going to need an antenna on the vehicle, and you're going to have to run that coax into the vehicle somehow. So again, those are two of the trickiest parts, is getting the power from the battery and getting the feed line from the antenna into the radio. Now, there's another thing you can do. If you have an HT in the car, you might want to run a little portable antenna holder that can hold your HT antenna outside the car with a short feed line. Very inexpensive and a way to greatly increase your signal as opposed to having it in the car. Here's a typical HT handheld radio. This is one of the cheap Baofangs out there. This is what it comes with, a charger and a belt clip and a headphone earpiece that you always lose and or break. But some basic things. Here's some other accessories you might be interested in. Here's the one I'm going to suggest you really need, probably the most of any of them. These two in the middle are probably the most important ones. If you operate a lot and you have the radio on your belt and you want to use a microphone, speaker microphone, so you can have it right by your ear, much more convenient. And if you operate a lot where you just throw the radio in the glove box and you don't use it often, it's not going to be charged when you need it sometimes. So having a 12-volt cigarette plug-in with a cable that powers the radio up, not just charges it, but powers it up when you're using it. These are available for a lot of the different models of radio, and that can make it really useful if you forget to charge the radio and you have it sitting in your car all the time and you need it in an emergency. So let's interrupt this broadcast for extra geekiness, and that's going to be in the form of antennas. So let's talk a little bit about some of the antennas. First of all, I have a link at the top here. This will take you out to a bunch more resources, and I'll be going through these later on antenna choices and different types of antennas. So that's the link to get to that. But before we even get there, let's start really simple. Let's say we have our HT and we want to improve performance and we want to spend just a few pennies. You can do it very easily by taking a piece of wire between 17 and 19 inches long, making it so it's on the grounded part of your antenna. I used a little wire connector here to fit it in there. That will act as a ground plane. It'll greatly improve your antenna for just a matter of a few cents worth of simple wire and a little connector. You might also consider a longer or an extendable antenna. This is an example right here. This antenna extends out, it pulls out. This antenna is about 18 inches long. This will increase greatly, but it's kind of a pain to carry around and not poke people in the face with it, but it is soft, so it won't hurt someone. You got to be careful with the metal ones that extend out. You might also want to build a J-pole. You could use this on your HT as long as it has the right connector that you put on the end of it. This is simply a section of 450 ohm feed line with a gap cut in it, and then it's tied to our coax feed at the bottom. This could have a hook at the top. You could put it up in a tree. You could push it up on a fishing pole. You could do a lot of different things with it. Nice thing, it rolls up in your pocket. You can carry it with you. This is a dual band. You can make a dual band J-pole or a single band J-pole. Beam antennas, Yagis, and quads could be used. Here's a mobile mount magnetic antenna. Here's a home base antenna. So these are some of the antennas I've been talking about. So let's look at some typical situations here, and let's see what we're talking about. So for a portable operation, if we're using an integrated antenna, it's going to be the rubber duck. But that doesn't mean we couldn't take that J-pole out with us, or a small ground plane, and even use it with our HT. You could use a portable, if you want a directional antenna, a portable Yagi or a log periodic would work. If you're doing direction finding, there's a very popular antenna made out of measuring tape. Just pull it out of that measuring tape you bought at Harbor Freight. Be careful, it is extremely sharp when you cut it. Cover the ends with something, either electrical tape or something else to keep the ends from cutting someone. But if you're going to operate satellites, you will probably want a little special satellite antenna that's dual band and able to handle both bands you're going to be using. As I mentioned earlier, extended whips can be a great way to increase, or using a tiger toe on it. If you're operating mobile and you're using an HT in the car, the integrated radio, you might want a mobile duck holder that can clip on the above your window outside with a small feed line to come back to your radio. Or a mobile radio a vertical with a whatever radio you're using. If you're doing direction finding, you might consider a Doppler array if you really get into fox hunting. I'm not going to talk about that tonight, but another special type of antenna for mobile operation is a horizontally polarized antenna. Typically a halo or loop antenna is a form of this if you need horizontal polarization for single sideband or CW or digital modes. For a base operation, if you want an integrated solution, you could put a back of the radio whip antenna on it, similar to what rabbit ears go on the back of a TV. Now remember though, if you're using a base radio that has a high power and you're using a back of the antenna radio, you have to carefully go through the calculations for RF exposure, because you don't want to run a 50-watt radio a foot away from you on VHF with the antenna right in your face. So that is something you need to be careful of if you are doing a back of the radio antenna. More likely you're going to be using a base vertical outside fed with coax. But you might also have a more high gain antenna such as a Yagi, a log periodic, or a quad. Direction finding is not very practical from home, so you're probably not going to use directional finding from your base. But you might want to have a satellite array because you can operate satellites from home. If you're operating in a HOA, you might have to have a hidden antenna. There's a number of different verticals that work very well that look like roof vents, and they actually fit over top of a roof vent and appear to be a innocuous roof vent, but they're actually a dual band antenna. There's also small dipoles, verticals, copper tape antennas, helical antennas, a whole variety.
Yeah.
Here's some examples. Yes.
A way to calculate the length of a tiger tail?
It's about yeah, you can use the frequency, the chart, but it should be of frequency divided, 234 divided by frequency. It'll give you about 19 inches for 2 meters. And again, cut it a little long, and you can clip a little bit off of the time as you test it.
Okay, that was
so here's a number of the antennas we've been talking about. This is one of these fiberglass. These start at about $75 and go up to about $250 depending on how much gain it has, how long it is. Some come in one piece, some come in two pieces and have to be screwed together because they couldn't ship them. Here's a mag mount with a loaded little loading coil at the bottom of it. Here's a Yagi pointed vertically with vertical polarization. Very easy to put up on top of a fishing pole, painter's pole, etc. Painter's poles work great for this. If you're operating from that, that mobile point, checkpoint for a marathon or a bicycle race or something, having a painter's pole with a little beam on it like this can be fantastic to make sure that your signal gets to where you need it to go to. Or having a pole with an omnidirectional antenna on it can work very well. Here's a copper pipe J-pole. Here's my HT. This is a picture of my HT with this orange antenna. That was my Christmas gift that I wished for this year. Here's one that folds up. It's called a tactical extended antenna, so it folds up in a little Velcro holder to hold it when you're not using it. Here's a big log periodic. Log periodics typically can be used on multiple VHF and UHF bands. So this particular one covers 6 meters through 1.2 gigahertz. Here's a quad. Here's one of the very, very popular antennas used for low Earth orbit satellites. This is called the ARRL antenna because it's made with aluminum poles very similar to arrow shafts. This is a cross antenna. It has elements for 2 meters. I'm sorry, for 440 going this way and elements going this way for 2 meters. It's got a little handheld at the end of it, and this particular one is available with a duplexer that fits in the handle, and you can attach it directly to a radio and operate both bands with that little duplexer. If you're interested in going mobile, I have 2 sites that have a lot of information. K0BG has a lot of information on HF mobile, but there's also a lot of stuff on VHF and UHF. And if you look down the side, he has antenna mounts, antenna matching, alternator and battery issues, amplifiers, antenna hats, bonding, cabling, glossary, ignition noise, portable operations, signal to noise ratio, tricks of the trade. He has a ton of stuff here. The other one is very interesting. This is a site from the Ham Radio School. We use their books from our classes for our local club. And one of the neat things about it is they have a website with some nice information that's not in the book. And this is a ham radio mobile operation going mobile part 1. And you can see it has a number of things that I've been talking about here in a lot more detail than I have time to cover tonight, showing you how to do your attach your extra cables to your battery clamps and things of that nature. Talking about grommets. This is a really good, really well written article. I think Bob N0NR wrote this particular one. And then there's part 2 on here also, where it goes into more depth even than the first one does. And he talks a lot about noise limitations, bonding, and things in this. So 2 really good articles from Ham Radio School. Stu and Bob do a really good job with the materials there. Or you can use your AI image generator. I said a mobile vehicle with multiple amateur radio antennas on it. This is what it gave me. So now back to our regularly scheduled program already in progress. So let's talk now about simply making a contact on an analog FM repeater. What's necessary? What do you need to do? What equipment do you need? And how to do it? So let's dive right in. There's a couple things you need. First of all, you need an FM radio and an antenna. Typically, you're vertically polarized, but doesn't have to be. You also need to know a few key pieces of information. You need to know the frequency of the repeater you want to use, what the offset frequency is, and what that direction is. Is it plus or minus that number of that frequency change? And then if it has tones required, and we'll talk more about tones in a few minutes, and I have a link here that talks a lot about tones, so you can click on that link, but I won't do that right now. So there's 5 set steps you need to do. You need to find the local repeater frequency and information. You need to tune the radio to that frequency and choose the offset that that particular repeater uses. Then you need to make sure you're shifting in the right direction, either up or down. Then you test the repeater by transmitting, and when you transmit, make sure you ID. It's required by the FCC. If necessary, you might need to set CT, CSS tones or other tones and try again. After everything's working, save the settings in the memory. So let's go through each of these steps one by one, but that's the 5 things you need to do to be successful at making an FM repeater contact. So we need to find that information. And I have a bunch of resources here where you can find repeaters around the US and around the world. You can find them in the form of listings, or you can use the IZ8WNH repeater map. It's actually good all around the world. but there's the ARRL repeater directory if you want to book. But all these other ones are online resources you can use. You can click on these links and go out and get information on the repeaters. You need to set up an account on this one, but you can just go out and look at the North American repeaters by clicking right here. That'll bring this up. You then can pick out which state you want. And then you can also tell it which bands you want to look at, whether you want all the bands. We'll just look at 2 meters for right now, just to make it simpler. But we could also do features like DMR, D-Star, etc. So these are 269 repeaters found in Ohio. They tell you whether they're on the air, off the air, whether being tested or unknown. So you want the ones that are on the air. You can search by county or by location. You can sort. Here's counties, here's cities. You can go by frequency. You can use your favorite little control F key. And I'm in Cuyahoga Falls, so I'm going to type in Cuyahoga Falls. And there's my local club's repeater. It says the frequency is 147.270. It says that it has plus. We're going to assume it has a standard shift because it doesn't tell us. And on 2 meters, that'll be 600 kilohertz. So when it's receiving, if you want to hear the repeater, you're going to listen on 147.27. You're going to transmit on 147.87. It has a CCTS, also known as PL tone, of 110.9. So you need to put that into your radio also. It tells you where it's located. It tells you it's an open repeater. If you click on the link, there's more information sometimes. Let's see what it shows here. I think it has a map. Yeah, there's a little map showing you where it's at and some of the features it has. So that's the information we need. And we can get it from any of these different sources. So let's just talk about what those things mean. Remember I said earlier, this is the repeater I'm displaying right here. It sends out, it receives on 147.87. So that's what you have to transmit into the repeater on. It sends out on 147.27, so that's where you have to listen. The difference between the two is called the offset. And this is basically how it works. It has a controller, a receiver, a transmitter, and it also has this little yellow box here which says tone squelch. So what happens is when it receives a signal on 147.87, it listens, it goes down to the receiver, but then the receiver says, is there a tone there or not? And if the controller doesn't hear that 110.9 hertz tone, it ignores it. So if we want this repeater controller to hear us, we need to give it the right tone. This is a diagram also from ham radio school, by the way. So we either need a plus frequency, minus frequency. It's 0.6 megahertz on 2 meters. It's 5 megahertz on 75 centimeters or 440. So different bands have different offsets. Whether it's plus or minus depends on the particular repeater, but the offset is typically one of these standard ones, but it can be something slightly different. The tone squelch, the most common type used in the US is CTCSS. And you need to set it for encode. That means that you want to encode the signal into your outgoing transmission. There's also something called decode, and decode is when you set it up on your radio when you're expecting a tone to be sent to the repeater by you. But for the most part, we need to worry about encode, not as much about decode. So you need to put that information into your radio. So you need to tune your radio to that frequency. You need to choose the offset, sometimes called sometimes called split, whether it's plus or minus. A lot of radios have what is called APRS. ARS, automatic repeat selectivity. So when you tune to a frequency, it will automatically put in the plus or minus for you based on what is usually used on that frequency. So if I would tune this particular radio and it had ARS turned on to 147.27, it would automatically show it as a plus. Okay, if I need to change it, I could change it. Notice this has minus chosen for this particular repeater, and it has the encode turned on. and it also has the decode turned on, but the encode is what we're really worried about here. Don't worry about the decode right now. So if this is all set up right and I key my microphone, I may or may not get a response from the repeater. Why would that happen? So when I test my radio by transmitting and IDing, I can listen for the repeater to make a noise. If I hear nothing, listen for, let me stop saying, listen on the radio before you transmit to make sure no one else is using it. If you hear nothing, then go ahead and key your radio and speak into the mic, identifying with your call sign. Most repeaters will return an audible tone, also referred to by the technical term kerchunk. So if you hear a kerchunk is the sound that you will hear. You might also hear the squelch just opening up if you don't hear that, or you may hear a tone being transmitted. That's the end of transmission tone that is used so people can tell when one person is done and the other person is going to start. Depends on the particular repeater, but you should get some response. If you don't get a response, why are you not getting a response? Number one, the repeater could be out of your range. It could be too far away. The repeater might not be in service or is no longer on the air. I had one of my new technician class graduates this winter call me. He was very frantic because he kept trying to get this one repeater to work near his house, and it turned out the repeater had not been on the air for 2 years. He didn't know that, but I knew that, and I was able to tell him that the repeater is not on the air, and that was why it wasn't working. It also will not work if it needs CSS and you don't have it turned on and you don't have the right tone in. So it has to not only have CTCS, but it has to have the prescribed tone. There's, I think, 30 different tones that are available. I can't remember the exact number off the top of my head. Again, that's listed on the repeater directory. The other problem may be that you have split set to the wrong frequency amount, or it's a non-standard frequency. It also could be there's something wrong with your radio or your antenna. So check by making a simplex contact with a close by friend or another radio to check to make sure it's not something in your system. So these are the most common things, and you notice they're all pretty easy to solve. So here's the tone or offset. The CTCS tone is used to minimize co-channel interference, because there's a 147.27 radio in Toledo, repeater in Toledo, and there's one in Akron. Typically that's too far apart, but a lot of times early in the morning you'll hear the two hearing each other. So that the people that are getting on in Toledo don't activate the one in Akron by mistake, we use two different CTCS tones. As long as they're different, that means that they won't interfere with each other, even though people are transmitting on the same frequency. There's two types. Encode is the one you send to trigger the repeater. Decode is one you have on your system to keep your repeater tone squelched all the time unless you hear the tone. Don't worry about the decode when you're first starting out. The offsets vary by table. Here's the offset for the different bands. They also could be plus or minus, and occasionally they'll have a non-standard frequency. That's not as common anymore. If you successfully access the repeater and you got everything working properly, that means you're ready to go. What you want to do then is put that into one of your memories so you don't have to program it again when you're ready to use it next time, and you don't have to look it up in the repeater guide. You can use the radio keypad. You need to see the instructions for your radio, or you can program it using software and an interfacing cable. We'll talk more about that in a few minutes here. For more information on using repeaters, there's how to use ham radio repeaters in the PL Tones article. You can click on that. How to use amateur radio repeaters by N4UJW. You can click on that article for more information. Now, let's say we're not interested in using a repeater. We want to make a simplex contact. Well, we still need to do some planning here and use the right frequencies and set things right. So, first of all, simplex is great practice for emergency communications. You might not be a repeater in the area. The repeater might be down. It doesn't require a new radio. You can do the same thing with a repeater and a simplex using the same radio. Simplex is a good chance to experiment with higher gain antennas because you're not depending on the antenna from the repeater, so you might need a little more gain to get to that person if they're far away. Many local clubs and organizations hold 2-meter FM simplex contests on a regular basis. They often use grid squares to distinguish how far apart they are. And this is a great way for your club to go out and do a little contest. And I'll talk about ours a little bit later. There's some videos here on using simplex. You can click on this video and watch the video. There's a number of them here that I have that you can take a look at. By the way, each band has a specific calling frequency. The one on the national calling frequency on 2 meters is 146.520. So on my radio off to the side here, which you can't see, I have one of my displays on the local repeater, and the other is always on 146.520 when someone might be passing through. Here is the frequencies you want to use. You can't just turn the radio on and pick any frequency and say that's a simplex frequency. There's some problems with that. First of all, you might be in the wrong part of the band, and some of you may not realize on 2 meters, the first 144.0 to 144.1 is only CW. So you can't use your FM radio there. So please don't pick that as a simplex frequency. The rest of the things, that's an FCC rule. The rest of the things are by what they call gentlemen's agreements or standard operating practice. The band is divided up by different modes so that people can find each other. So 144.1 to 144.275 is single sideband. There's another CW portion for propagation beacons. 144.3 to 144.6 is for satellites. Please do not use it for simplex. 146.60 to 144.9 is FM repeater inputs. Again, don't use it for simplex. There's also weak signal in FM simplex. You're welcome to use those frequencies. These frequencies from 145.1 up to and .3 and .5 and .07 and .09 are the simplex frequencies widely used for packet. Don't use those for FM other than packet use. Linear transponders, frequency outputs. So what are you supposed to use? You're supposed to use the green sections only. 144.9 to 145.1, 146.4 up to 146.58. As I mentioned in that section is the 146.52 and 147.420 to 147.57. Those are the places you should be using for simplex. These are the frequencies for 2 meters. These are the specific frequencies. You don't even need to look on that chart. Now, different parts of the country use different spacings. Some use 15 kilohertz spacing, some use 20 kilohertz spacing. Just so happens almost everyone in the east uses the 15, everyone in the west except for California uses the 20. If you notice, this chart has some numbers in green and red. The rest are in black. The ones that are in green or red are the same in 15 kilohertz spacing and 20 kilohertz spacing. So if you use the frequencies in green, you're going to be good in either area of the country. And as I said earlier, the national calling frequency that most people monitor, if you're going to be chatting for a long time, move off of that frequency to one of the other simplex frequencies. Here's some simplex frequencies for other bands: 6 meters, 2 meters, 70 centimeters, and 24 centimeters. Now, a lot of times I'll get calls or emails from people that just have taken a class and finished up, and they say, Anthony, I took my class, I got an HT, it's just not really doing it for me. I want to set up a home station. So I put together a little brief thing on that, and some of the criteria I used were a dual band or quad band radio, dual simultaneous receive capability, and greater than 30 watts of output. You could go a bunch of different directions, but that's what I picked. Possibilities are endless, especially when you start looking at used radios. And I picked all new radios just to do this. When you click on this link, it'll take you out to the page that I put together. And it'll talk about some of the criteria I used. It also gives you some information on coax, which you want to stick with. So you want to stick down here in this area for lower loss on 2 meters. I also have a link here to the beginner's guide from VHF, UHF that we did for RATPAC. But the most important thing on here is this little link right here that takes you out to a spreadsheet where I put together some hypothetical stations. Here are 5 different antennas, some dual bands and a couple quad bands and some tri-band antennas for using the quad band radios. They won't work as a quad band because 10 meters isn't on any of these. So this is 2 meter and 70 centimeter for the dual bands, and 6 meters, 2 meters, and 70 centimeters for the tri-band antennas. I picked 4 radios. There's more that I could have picked, but these met the criteria. These all have dual receive. In other words, they're not only just dual band, but I can actually listen to 2 frequencies at the same time. I have some links for different vendors here for the particular ones. I have some listing what they cover. Typical price of what they're going for. The power output, these are all 50 watt maximum radios. They have lower power settings, and I suggest you use lower power when necessary. The one I found includes a power supply. The quad bands have 10 meter FM, but that's not useful if you have your technician class license. You can't use FM as a technician on 10. But the rest of the bands, 6, 2, and 440 are all available to technicians. So I picked 4 radios, 2 dual bands, 2 quad bands, and then a power supply for the radios that didn't have a power supply. I picked one of the inexpensive, pretty high amperage power supplies. And I put together options, and you can see they run anywhere from $308 to $545. Your prices may vary depending on which cells are available and which vendors you work with. And you're going to have to remember you got to throw some coax in there too. So basically that's what it would cost to set up a home 50 watt VHF dual band station with enough gain that you can probably work a multi-county area with if you get your antenna up high enough.
It's FM, right?
FM, yes. And that's just the basis for getting started. And that's, as I say on the side, another option instead of getting the FM only radio is to get a multi-band radio. And maybe you might not only want to get a multi-mode radio, you might want to get one that has HF with it. So if you're planning on operating HF for your base station, you might want one of these 3 radios. These 3 radios all have 160 meters through 10 meters, multi-mode, single sideband, CW, etc. And they also have 2 meters, 440, 6 meters on them. These are 200 watt radios, although the power output on the VHF, UHF bands may be 50 or 35 or something. This is a 5 watt radio. This is the ICOM 705. It's a portable QRP radio. But all 3 of these radios are right around $1,200, $1,300, $1,100, somewhere in that area. But they get you VHF, UHF, FM, plus single sideband, plus CW. You can operate FT8 with them. You can also operate HF if your license covers the HF bands. With all of these, with all technician licenses, you'd have all of 6 meters available, and these all have 6 meters in addition. You have portions of 10 meters on single sideband and digital modes for 10 meters. Because these have single sideband, you can use them as opposed to those other radios I was talking about were FM only, so you can't use those as a technician on 10 meters. They also have portions of the 4 bands that you can operate CW on. And if you upgrade to general, you'll have even more access on these radios. Here's a spreadsheet of those particular radios I put together. This is part of a bigger spreadsheet. There's a big matrix of all the HF radios here. And then there's also VHF mobile radios here on this matrix that you can look at. But the one I was showing right now is the HF-VHF combo radios. You notice there's only 3 currently available, but there's a bunch of discontinued ones you might find on the used market. This weekend I was at a Hamfest in Toledo. There was a really nice IC746 Pro for $600 used. That's a good price, and that would give you VHF, UHF, and all of HF. Doesn't have a built-in sound card, so if you want to operate FT8 or FT4, you're going to have to add an external sound card. But this list also has, as I mentioned earlier, the VHF matrix with mobile radios, dual band, quad band. It tells you here how many bands are there. It tells you whether the radio has dual receive capability, and then it shows which bands are there and other features of the particular radio. Now, yet another option is to buy just an FM only radio that has more features, a more expensive radio. And you might get things like APRS, GPS, Bluetooth capability, sound card capability, internet linking, image transfer. Sometimes might require an extra camera be added, but it's a possibility. Digital FM, such as DMR, D-Stars, Fusion, etc. Crossband repeater capability, interactive touchscreens, audio recording and playback, band scope or waterfalls, SD card storage of information. These are all things that are available. Whether you want to spend the extra money or not is up to you. Although many digital, now let's talk a little bit about digital FM, because I said I was going to talk about it later. Although many digital FM radios can access analog repeaters and simplex, to use it for digital modes, you need to use different procedures. You're going to need to have a radio that's capable of operating those digital modes you want to use. They're not compatible with each other. So each one is going to require a different mode, and they're going to work with different repeater systems. So this is outside the scope of the presentation today, but one thing I will touch on, if you want a way to operate those digital modes without a digital mode radio, you can use what's called a hotspot that lets you use your analog HT to get into a computer, and then it uses the computer system to connect to the digital mode. And there's a couple of them listed right here. You can also use these little apps for Android and for iPhone that'll let you use your computer or your phone to connect to these type of digital repeaters. And APRS Droid allows you to send APRs via your computer. So these are all ways around the problem of accessing a repeater without actually having a radio. Some other ways you can do it. Echolink is a way that you can set up so that Echolink ties different radios together, but it also allows a home user at their PC to connect via the internet to a gateway that then lets you get to a specific repeater. All-Star is very similar, has a little better audio tone. And then I also have an article here on online tunable software-defined receivers. Some of these have VHF and UHF. Some also include commercial public service bands. So you might want to take a look at this. There's a presentation I did on this for RATPAC, and this is the link to the slideshows. But if you go back, you can find the online tunable SDR receivers. And finally, the last slide I have, the last actual activity slide here is computer programming software. There's 3 ways you can get software for your radio. Some manufacturers have programming software that comes with the radio or that you can buy separately for the radio. Not every manufacturer has that. Not every model has that. You can also use third-party vendors such as RT Systems. They have also sell interface cables for most of the radios that they supply software for. The prices vary. There's also a free software, open source software called Chirp. You have to provide your own cable, and you have to make sure that your radio is compatible. Please do not use Chirp until you check the list to make sure your radio is compatible. You could brick your radio if you try and connect it and it's not compatible with your specific model. So this link takes you out to the Chirp site. There's also a bunch of websites and videos you can see on Chirp on how to use it. You can download the software. It's free. I really like it a lot. I use it all the time. It makes it much easier for me to program radios. And the nice thing is if you and your friends have the same radio, once you get it set up for one radio, you can easily clone a radio using Chirp. So that is the basic program. I have 2 more things for you. First is additional resources. And again, I told AI to give me baskets full of amateur radios and a radio reference library. VARA FM is a form of WinLink that supports email via RF without the use of internet. It also lets you send attachments, position reporting, weather and information bulletins. It's well known for its role in interoperable emergency and disaster relief communications. It's probably one of the biggest workhorses for emergency communication. But it works with FM radios, VHF, UHF radios, so you're going to want to find out about this if you're interested. Fortunately, there's a website, there's software, there's an old RATPAC presentation on how it works with how to do it. These will all be very useful for you if you want to go into that. We also maybe will do another VARA FM program as part of this new series in communication basics to see whether if we get the demand. There's also the WinLink Book of Knowledge and how to instructions. You can click on any of these for more information. K0NR, one of the people that all those diagrams came from before, has a blog, and he has a great thing there on called the VHF FM Operator's Guide. You can click on that link and go out and read through this. It has a lot of good information in it. He also has a book, by the way, called VHF Summits and More, and you can find that on Amazon if you're interested. Once you're interested in getting on beyond the local repeaters and Simplex, I have a lot more things you can do as a technician class licensee, and there's a whole slideshow and a RATPAC presentation, a video called Technician's Life Beyond Local Repeaters. Talks about satellites, different modes, different bands, etc. And as I mentioned earlier, we have a beginner's guide to VHF and UHF that Marty Wohl, N6VI, and I did. There's about 5 hours of video on that. 4 separate videos and a slideshow with everything in much more depth than I had time for tonight. We also have a beginner's guide to HF that I did with Dennis Kidder, W6DQ. If you click on this link, it'll take you out and give you full information on those, and it's in a nice format. You can submit this to your local newsletter editor, and they can put this in there, and it has all the details on all 4 weeks of each of these programs and the slideshows and an outline on what it covers. So again, that's this link right here. You can also shoot that QR code. Now, this is the end, and this is the QR code. I'll leave that up there for a few seconds, but we're actually going to hold questions for a few minutes because I have another portion I need to go over real quickly here. So I'll come back to that slide if necessary. But wait, there's more. And the addendum is First Steps in Amateur Radio Emergency Communications. This was the first in our new series that we're running on RATPAC. And not only do we want to talk about these, but we want to talk about some other things that you need to do along with each of these steps. So this is available at tiny.cc/fs-ar-em, where you can shoot the QR code. This will also be available in the download materials on the Dropbox. So what we want to talk about are some of the next steps once you get your license and once you start operating your radio to get started in amateur radio emergency communications prep. Think of your FCC license as just the first piece in a big puzzle of amateur radio. The other key pieces include finding mentors, getting more training both in emergency communication and general amateur radio, getting on the air experiences, and joining local MCOM groups. Think of your FCC license as a learner's permit to learn a lot more. One of the things I suggest is you find a mentor. A mentor is someone who can help you answer questions and avoid some of the pitfalls of the hobby. This is sometimes referred to as an Elmer. Mentors can answer questions about what rig to buy, loan you an antenna analyzer, help you when you're having trouble understanding a particular concept. If you haven't already, I suggest you find a mentor or mentors. Where do you find a mentor? The first place might be the place that you got your license. If there was a local club you took a licensing class with, that might be a good place to start looking. Lots of old-timers are more than happy to help newcomers, and many clubs have formal mentoring programs. To find a club in your area, there's 2 links, one from the ARRL, one from QRZ.com, and I strongly suggest finding a local club. Nowadays, you might find your mentor online. There's lots of websites and mailing lists that are geared towards helping other people become better amateur radio operators. And RATPAC is one great example of that. One common fallacy is that you can only have one mentor. In fact, many hams have multiple mentors. When I have antenna questions, I go to Steve. When I have technical radio questions, I go to Frank. When I have questions about different modes, I go to specific people. The next thing you need to do is think about taking AUXCOM training. And the MCOM training is available from a number of sources, but the one I would start with is the ECD AUXCOM. That's the official government training through FEMA, has all the courses you're going to need and information on them. Click on that link for more information. But I also have information on ARRL, AUXCOM training, and ARES, mcom-training.org, CERT basic training, and disaster skills, AUXCOM training, the Wave Talkers who focus on WinLink, communication unit training resources, and of course the RATPAC Thursdays are a great place for information on MCOM. But to use the radio, you really need practice, practice, and more practice. Just like proficiency in any field, practice makes perfect. Amateur radio get on the air practice opportunities can be found in a number of different activities. And it's very important that you get on the air as often as possible and have these experiences so you're comfortable with your radio and you're used to operating. So I put together a list here And what I'm actually going to do is pop out to this list in a second, but nets are a great way to stay active each week. ARRL Field Day coming up in June. Amateur radio contests, not for the competitive aspect. If you think contesting is a dirty word, I want you to forget that and think of contest as simply the bands are full of a lot of people that want to talk to you, so it's great practice. Don't worry about sending in an entry in the contest. All you need to do is make sure you can give them the exchange they're expecting from you, and they'll be happy to take your contact. And you don't even have to record their exchange if you don't care. Special event stations, POTA, Parks on the Air, SOTA, great opportunities to set up your equipment in portable operations. Fox hunting, direction finding, and emergency communication exercises. I put together a link right here, and there's also a QR code you can shoot. This tiny.cc link is a document. This will also be in the Dropbox, and it has how you can find nets around the country, has information on Field Day coming up the third weekend in June, has contest information, and it has a slideshow to introduction to contesting and a video recording that I did. Also, if you're an ARRL member, you can take the 5-module class in the Learning Network called Introduction to Amateur Radio Contesting, which I wrote. If you're looking for contests, the WA7 B&M contest calendar has all the contests listed that are going on that week, and you can look throughout the entire year. I also picked some contests I think are great for newbies. State QSO parties are a really good way, and the State QSO Party Challenge is part of that. There's also 4 main VHF and UHF contests, 3 ARRL contests in January, June, and September, and the CQ contest in July. The N2 SNL list has VHF and UHF contest activity calendar that you can check. It's not just contests, but other VHF, microwave, other activities in those bands. There's also some weekly training. There's something called the Phone Fray. It's an HF contest. It's only 1 hour long. It's on Tuesday evenings. There's CW contest, the slow speed CW contest, and a RIDI's operator. These are all 1 hour events. There's also local or state contest. Look in your area and see if they're doing any VHF, UHF, Simplex contest or drills. Our local Ohio ARRL does these twice a year. HF NVAS contest. Again, our ARRL does a drill once a year on that. It's coming up next week. Or you can create your own contest. We have something called CFARC to the Field. I have the information here on how we set it up. We took all the metro parks in our county and the bicycle trails and things, and we set them up as points. We have a contest once or twice a year where we go out. These are the frequencies we use. We chose these because all technicians could use them. And we simply have exchange of what park you're in, and that's how we do it. And we have a list of all the information. If you want to build your own party, your own VHF, UHF, Simplex contest, all the things you need are in here to build your own. POTA, I have some resources on POTA operations. Again, a great thing to do out in the outside to set up portable, and they do have POTA on VHF and UHF. Fox hunting information and emergency communication exercises information, including WinLink Thursday and WinLink Wednesday, which I strongly suggest if you want to get started with WinLink. So all this information is available from this link at the end of this portion of the talk. And again, this is the first in a series of sessions that we'll be doing on first steps in amateur radio emergency communications prep. And RATPAC will be doing these. We won't run this whole part again, so we'll have this part separate so you can suggest your friends take a look at this part as we go through each of the different sessions on different topics. So now I'll go back and I will leave this at the question for the whole slideshow that we did earlier on VHF, UHF station setup. So I'll go ahead and first of all, we'll go through the chat and see if there's any questions there. And then if you have a question, raise your hand, and Dan or Barry will let you know. Let's see.
A good one.
It's ratpac.us, not ratpacus.org. Okay?
Man.
Very good.
Okay.
Wouldn't a noob, it's not really a noob question, it's a very good question, Ben. There's no such thing as noob questions, but wouldn't one usually have an antenna that connects to your transceiver already Is swapping antennas around common, and why?
Well, with an HT, it's an integrated antenna that comes with it. So in that case, you would, but on most of the other radios, an antenna is not included. The exception is handheld or HT radios would have antennas with them. Most of the other radios I've been talking about, the mobiles and HFs, don't have any antennas that come with them at all. They simply have a connection on the back to run cable to an antenna. Now, on an HT, the rubber duck is a very convenient thing when you're carrying it on your belt, but it is a very inefficient antenna. It's a compromise, it's a helical coil, it's small, it's not very good, but adding that tiger tail can help a little bit, but even more, an extendable or extended antenna can make it the reception a lot better. Now, the thing you need to do whenever you're buying any of these is to make sure you have the right connector on the antenna that you buy, because there's 5 different possibilities. You might have a BNC, or you might have an SMA, and there's 4 types of SMA connectors. So you need to make sure you have the right connector or the right adapter to be able to use different things. And if you want to hook your HT up to a coax with an antenna on the end of it, such as a mobile antenna, you're going to need an adapter to go from the connection on the top of your HT to either a BNC or to PL259. And we talk about that a little bit in the VHF, UHF series, but those are something you're going to want to do if you want to be able to switch antennas. Next thing, Barry.
Okay, will the links be active on this posting in the video? And it's a great intro for new hams from Lloyd.
Yes.
Yeah, be posted, right?
Yeah, the links will all be, the PDF forms of these documents will be posted, but if you use the links that are in the slideshows, it'll give you the most recent one. So all my materials are all live, and I also have a link here that takes you to all my presentations, tiny.cc/K8ZT-P. This isn't RATPAC presentations, these are my personal presentations, and if your local club would like a presentation, I'd be happy to do one for them via Zoom. I'm working on Present All States, and I've done over 500 presentations since the beginning of the pandemic, so I'd be happy to do a presentation for you. So again, tiny.cc/K8ZT-P. You can shoot the QR code, or you can go out to my website at k8zt.com, click on the green button that says presentations, and that'll give you a list of all my presentations. Next one, Barry.
First, has a comment that it looks like the ARRL training has changed a bit recently. And yes, as of April 1st, it's going to change a little bit more. We used to have EC001 and EC0016. EC0016 is currently in rewrite. EC001 is being broken down into 3 parts like it was originally. The first part and the second part are going to be available on April 1st, and the third part will be available in a month or so. But if you haven't taken EC001 and want to do it before April 1st, because it's all going to change after that. Let's see.
Well, while we're waiting there, let's pick up a hand here. Robert, KD7WMV in Washington, you want to take it?
Hi, yeah, thank you. Sorry if I missed this section, but I didn't see it explicitly in the list towards the end there about how to get experience. One of the really good ways to get experience on VHF and UHF is to participate in public service activities, such as bike rides, fun runs, marathons, and so forth. You can find those events through your local club or emergency group. It depends on your area. Here in the Seattle area, my club assembles and publishes a list of those each year. But that's really an excellent way, because you'll always have someone to talk to. You'll have people to help you if you have trouble, and you get to meet other hams, and it's a great experience all around.
And that's the last one on the list, so thank you. I didn't read it out, but it is down there. It's the last one.
Yeah, under MCOM?
Yes.
Oh, okay, thanks.
Yeah, but that's a great reminder.
That's a very important one.
Yes.
Also.
Yes.
Links, like you mentioned Dropbox, links to Dropbox and all the other resources are going to be shown in the detail of every video that we post. So you don't have to worry about how to do it. You watch the video and it will all be available.
Yes.
Okay, Midge, you want to come on?
thing I want to mention is we can all congratulate Anthony for being recognized by the ARRL as a leader, as an outstanding leader and contributor to the radio ham networks. I mean, Anthony has been doing this for how many years, Anthony?
Well, I've been a ham for 41. I think I've been teaching the whole time, but on Zoom, that's been since the beginning of the pandemic. And let me correct you just one thing. It's the Dayton Hamvention that gave me the award. It wasn't the ARRL.
Served it. And you
Yeah.
did a presentation for us a couple years ago, and it was wonderful. And you're going to do another one for us this year. And my question was about the pigtail. Does the pigtail, can it just be on the HHT just hanging?
Yeah, it's insulated wire, so it you don't have to work. Yes.
Have to be tight up by the connection.
Yeah, you need it to be on the ground portion of the antenna. So typically, what you do is you put it under the antenna, screw it down, and it will make contact. So you want it to be. If you can't get it there, if you have a place on the radio like the belt clip, you can screw it on the belt clip even and do it that way too. But yeah, Chris is showing you right there. He's putting his antenna down part way, and then he's going to put the tiger tail in there. But if you can't do that, I know some antennas it's inconvenient. You can use the screw that goes into your belt clip typically, as long as it's making electrical connection with the case.
I do have another question, but I can't find it right now. Go ahead.
We'll come back to you. That's no problem.
Okay, Barry, how you doing?
Chris says one very important thing to do when putting in repeaters on the radio is be sure you find what repeaters are in active use in your area, which could be pretty difficult nowadays because you could get on a repeater frequency and it could be dead and no one uses it. So you want to be able to ask some hams what are the most used repeater frequencies in your area. And a lot of times if you're going to get involved with MCOM, most of the MCOM groups publish their primary, secondary, and tertiary radio repeater frequencies. So you would want to program those into your HT.
Okay, Gene, you want to come on?
Yeah, good evening, everybody. Fantastic presentation tonight. Goes without saying, I think. I have a seldom used dual band mobile radio, and I want to put in a Go kit for MCOM. It's capable of putting out 50 watts, but I plan on doing probably no more than 20 with a mag mount that will be attached to the top of my pickup truck. What would be the minimal type of battery, assuming it's LiPo, battery for this when it comes to amp hours? Obviously, voltage will be 12.5, but minimum when it comes to amp hours.
Well, first of all, I wouldn't use LiPo. I'd use lithium ferric phosphate. Much better.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
That's what I meant. Sorry.
Yeah, it's hard to say that, Gene. I'm running a 6 amp hour because I have mine set up that way. It depends how long you plan on using it and whether you can recharge it in the vehicle. So it really depends. And on the Go kit, you know, I would also think about when you're putting the Go kit together, if it's going to be something you can take out of the vehicle, make sure you make plans for a base antenna in addition to the mag mount you might have on the car. And that might be simply that roll-up J-pole, or it might be one of the fiberglass antennas we talked about earlier, or something along those lines.
Another thing,
Yeah, it's pretty much.
And we
Go
talked
ahead.
a lot more about that in the VHF, UHF series with Marty, so take a look at those 4 hours. And
Okay.
if you're trying to figure out where it's at, bring any of those up and download the slideshow, and then from the slideshow you can tell which one of the 4 you want to watch.
Yeah, I will do that. Appreciate your answers. And again, great presentation tonight. Thank you.
you know, in all the years I've been doing this, I've never had one project end up the way I started it. So get your basics, what you have in mind, and follow that line. Sooner or later, you'll find a reason, for whatever reason, that you'll have to make a modification. But that's how you learn. And what works for you may not work for me, and vice versa. So you get out there and experiment a little bit. Robert, you got your hand up again, sir. You want to take it?
Yeah, I'm just full of thoughts tonight. In response to the question about which repeaters are actually going to have activity on them, a good way to find active repeaters, actively used repeaters, is to look around at the web pages. If there's no comment overall listing, look at the web pages for clubs and emergency groups in your area. Find their nets. The repeaters that those nets are on will tend to be the more actively used repeaters.
Yeah, the net. I have a number of net guides in that article. That's very useful to find, and also you might find that one of your local clubs might have a list. For example, I keep a list for our 3 or 4 county area here, with descriptions of what the net is and what the frequencies are and times and everything. So yes, again, I can't stress enough how helpful it can be to be a member of a local club and to get some of that information to you.
Yeah.
Mitch, you got your hand up again, lady. You want to go?
Yeah, I want to ask about the National Calling System frequency. I have been monitoring it many days, and there's no usage of it that I can determine. Anthony, what should I be doing, or what am I doing wrong? Maybe I programmed it wrong, but
Well, no, you probably have it right, but one thing you do want to check 2 things. One, you want to make sure that you don't have CCTS tones turned on. If you have the decode tone setting, it means that people have to send a code to you to break the squelch. So I'm guessing that's probably not the case, but that's one thing I would check. The other thing too is if you have it on an HT sitting on your desk, remember it's going to be simplex. It isn't like hearing a repeater that's going to be lower power, smaller antennas, further distance away. So if you have an outside antenna and you're not hearing anything on it, there may not be a lot of activity in your area. I hear 3 or 4 times a day. I don't hear a lot, but I do hear some. Also, make sure you have your squelch set right at the point where it kicks in, because again, just like what I said about the repeaters, some of these stations are going to be a lot weaker than the repeaters that you listen to.
it may be the squelch, because I just have I just received a 991 a few months ago, and I am working with the squelch. It's really kind of touchy.
Yeah, you don't want to set the squelch too aggressively on simplex because you'll cut people out. And it should be just at the point where it's just ready to trigger.
Okay, thank you so much. And I'm
You're
so
welcome.
one.
And I would suggest, what I really suggest is find someone in your area and make a couple simplex contacts on 146.520, and that way you'll know that everything is working.
Great idea.
You know, I really can't stress enough that get on the air experience is extremely important. Even if it's just with someone down the street from you, you know, getting on the air is a great way to solve a lot of the problems. And I'm going to suggest too, if you have a technician class license and you have a radio on 10 meters, get on this weekend, Friday night at 000 UTC, the CQWPX contest. You can work anyone in the world. The exchange is a serial number, so you'll have to keep track as you work each one person, you know, just keep counting up. But there'll be activity on 10 meters. So if you have a technician class license, 28.3 to 28.496, listen, be ready to give them a serial number. If you don't care about entering the contest, don't even worry about the serial number they give you, but you have to give them a consecutive serial number. And it's work anyone, anywhere, so you don't have to worry about working the wrong people. It's a single sideband contest. If you have a general class or higher, you can get on a bunch of different bands, but if you have a technician class, 10 meters, 143.28.30 to 28.496 is the frequencies. Single sideband, upper sideband.
Anthony, that contest is actually the following Saturday, the 29th, next weekend. But this weekend there's a sprint.
Yes, I'm sorry. I do have the yes. I'm 1 week too early here. Sorry about that. Yes, yeah, next week.
Yeah, there is an SSB sprint this weekend. I think that would also be eligible. That's just 4 hours Saturday night, I think.
And that doesn't tend to get a lot of activity on 10 meters, but it might have some. But you know, the A7 BNM contest calendar. It's in that list. We'll show you all the contests that are going on each weekend around the world. And again, if you're not used to contesting, take a look at that presentation I did for RATPAC on introduction to contesting. That'll tell you the basics of how an exchange works and what other people are expecting from you.
Okay.
Someone mentioned field day. Put it on your, if you don't have it on your calendar now, put field day on your calendar, and I want you to put another date on your calendar. I want you to go out, this is going to be something you have to do yourself. Go out on the contest calendar that's there and find out, or go to the ARRL site and find out what the date is for the VHF, UHF contest, because I want you to get on. Even if you don't transmit, I want you to get on and listen. So you have months. It'll be the first weekend in June. So you have quite a bit of time to get ready for that. And I want everyone out there to try and at least listen. There isn't usually a lot of FM activity. It's mostly single sideband, CW, and a lot of FT8. But even if you can't operate on those modes, there is some FM activity anyway.
Okay, Barry, how are we doing in chat?
We're pretty up to date in chat. Anthony picked up the field day. If you have never operated and you don't really feel comfortable operating yet, still go out to a local field day, find out where it is and watch. See how the other people are operating. Take notes a little bit. You will learn a lot. Maybe they'll even put you on the air. Most of them have a go-to station where people with very little operating experience can operate, and observe and see what their antennas are, what their radios are, ask questions. Don't be afraid to ask questions, because there are no such thing as a stupid question. Go out there and have fun. It's like field day can be, even if it's just for an hour or two, it can be an awful lot of fun. I used to operate 24 hours on field day. I can't do that anymore, but it was tons of fun to be able to make contacts on field day, and it's rapid fire and it's quick and there's no chance to relax. It's highly competitive in some places, but you can learn an awful lot about how to operate should it ever be an emergency situation, and you have to be in that situation.
And also, RATPAC has, we've done a video the last 2 years for Field Day. We'll do another one this year on a Field Day update, but you can go back and watch the videos that Marty and I have done together on Field Day. Yeah, thank you. Someone put the VHF contest. It's June 8th this year. So it's actually the second Saturday in the month. It would be Saturday and Sunday. It's always the first full weekend, so they don't do the 30th, 31st. But I'm sorry, the 30th and 1st. So yeah, those will be coming up. Other questions?
And yes, if you only have a tech license and you go to field day, you can operate HF on any of the bands as long as you operate under a control operator. So as long as there's someone sitting next to you that's a higher class license, you can operate on any of the bands. So don't hesitate to go out there and try to operate. In most cases, most clubs will allow you to do that.
Well, you gotta be careful what call sign you're using when you do that.
Yeah. Well, the other thing I want to suggest to you too is I always offer this at our local club, but in case no one asks, if when you go to your local club, ask, is there anyone that has an HF station that I can come over and observe you operating? Or would you let me come over and operate under your call? And it's a great way to learn about things that are going on that people have done. So you need to ask in some cases if no one's offering, but ask some of the people that are active in your club that you find. And again, I want you to all, if you don't have a mentor or mentors, you need to think about doing that also. So there's a number, I gave you a number of pieces of homework to do in addition to going through all the slides and things. But yeah, we really want you to get active. That's one of the main things that makes it easier to learn how to do all this stuff.
Okay, Midge, you got your hand up, lady. Go ahead.
And another question, it's a technical question. At one point, and this was a couple years ago, the ARRL was writing that you had to include your email in your QRZ information. And then they dropped it, and it's not really required. What happened to that?
No, it's not the ARRL. It's the FCC requires you to have your email on file with them.
Was that what it is? Okay.
Yes.
But the QRZ doesn't.
QRZ does not require you to do it now. I would suggest also that That's one of my favorite topics. If you haven't registered on QRZ's webpage, do that and you will get control of your call signs information. Then check that to make sure everything is correct. And if you want to add your email to QRZ, you can do it from there. There's no charge to do it, to sign up as a QRZ account holder. There's a charge if you want to use extra features, but to just do that. And if you go back and watch the presentation I did on QSLing a couple months ago for RATPAC, I talk about using the features of QRZ.com in there.
Okay, I thank you for correcting that because it was the FCC requires the email.
Yes.
not- Thank you.
And you also want to make sure if you've moved, that you have your address up to date with FCC. The two things FCC requires is you keep a current email and a current valid address on file with them at all times.
We had an interesting discussion about that today. What happens if you don't have an email? And there are some people out there, are some hams out there that do not have emails. And we were discussing that, how to get our email for people that don't have email. It's a really complicated topic, believe it or not.
Okay, let's turn back to more technical things. Any other questions on setting up a VHF, UHF station?
Everything is good in chat, so. Oh yeah, I saw something today. The FCC is going to add two-factor authentication to be able to log on to their website as of a couple of weeks from now. So if anyone needs to log on to your FCC account and set up the two-factor authentication, you're getting really serious about security.
Okay. Anybody else got any comments out there? Questions?
Yeah, it's not just the FCC. I think every government agency is required to use two-factor authentication to get into any of their record bases.
Oh, by the way, if you're still with us and this is your first RATPAC meeting, if you wouldn't mind dropping in the chat how you found us, we'd appreciate that. And again, if you are new, ratpac.us. We have 3 email lists that you can sign up for through Groups.io. Just go to the webpage, its information's there. We're also on Facebook. We're on X, formerly Twitter, and we're also on Mastodon. And I think we're also on Threads.
We're everywhere. We're everywhere.
Yes. And we're also right now on 7.0474 if you want to contact me on on FT8 right now. But yeah.
If you haven't noticed, Anthony likes to solicit over there. He takes care of himself. He puts those plugs in there.
Yes, we are on Discord. It hasn't been activated yet.
Yes.
Okay. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I really appreciate you coming in tonight. We're going to have a lot more of these things. And as we get closer to the field day, we hope we have you prepared for it. There's a lot that goes on and in between too. So we're hoping we're meeting your needs here. Is there anybody else have anything to comment?
Oh, just one quick thing. The 2 documents are actually already up on the RATPAC list. So if you go to tiny.cc/ratpac-list or go to the website, the 2 documents from tonight are already been posted up there as PDFs in the Dropbox.
Okay.
The video will be a day or 2 before we get that.
Okay. Okay, anybody else? Looks like Dave is hollering for FCC there. I don't know what that was about in chat.
Oh, also, just a reminder, if you have anything you'd like us to talk about, drop us an email through in the mailing list. We'd love, especially if you'd have another follow-up topic that you'd like for the first steps in preparation, communication, amateur radio, emergency communication prep. We'd love to cover other topics like this that you would find useful.
I might point out that Anthony he will be doing a presentation for I'm a section manager for ARRL here in Idaho. He's going to be doing a presentation for us there coming up soon. He's going to be doing presentations for some hamfests that I'm aware of. So he's out there and very active, and that's how you learn, is by doing things, and he's a doer. Dan, you got your hand up, sir. Go ahead.
Yeah, so a good definition of emergency communication would be a helpful start to the process. I think as many different organizations as there are out there, there's really a lot of inconsistencies about what the goal of emergency communications is.
And it might be different where you are than someplace else, because most of that we rely upon your local agencies and their needs. But yes.
Well, you just said it, Dan. Thank you.
And all I could do is help you with the technical. I'll help you all get the operating techniques and the other things ready to go. And we'll let you then we'll let you guys work with whoever's in your area that's going to be the people that are going to be doing the things.
Okay, anybody else? Been a good meeting. Really I got a couple emails, a couple people couldn't get in, but most of them are getting in, so hopefully we're getting this thing fixed. Say 73s to you all, and see you next week, if not before.